youtube.com/MugenLord. Subscribe to the channel for gaming news, updates, discussion, and live streams. Signing off.
Hey guys, it's MugenLord here, and I'm back again with another video. Today I want to talk about Dragon Ball Kakarot. This is a follow-up to my previous video that I talked about called Dragon Ball Kakarot Will Suck. And I want to say that that was the most controversial video I've ever made here on my YouTube channel, and it's the very first video that I had a like and dislike ratio that was out of this world. The first video that had been disliked more than liked, and I found it kind of interesting, and the fact is that with that video, it brought in more so the Dragon Ball community or the anime video game community, because there's a lot of faces I've never seen before that normally comment on my channel or comment on my videos in general. And it was quite interesting to see everybody's feedback and everything. Now, like I said, I love constructive criticism. I love people to have their own opinion, because I'm not here to shut down anybody else's opinion or voice, because that's the platform that I have created for you guys. I want people to have different opinions, but it's to a point to where it's how you give your opinion or your criticism, because, you know, don't just, you know, say that my opinion is wrong or that you don't like my opinion, but don't give your opinion or tell me why you don't like my opinion, you know, and you follow up with your opinion. You have more so a lot of the comments and negativity came from more so people coming in and just throwing insults instead of just giving me a reason why my opinion just sucks or a reason why my opinion is just stupid or just wrong. Instead, a lot of people just did a lot of name calling and just did a lot of insults, which I found very immature. And it seemed like from that community, there's a lot of immaturity going around when it comes to that. Now, I have a lot of issues when it comes to what's been going on as far as the landscape is concerned with anime games and how these publishers are dealing with anime games. It seems like these developers aren't really putting much effort into these games. It's like a cycle. They just turn out these games. They feel more like cash grabs, and they don't really do much to the gameplay at all. Most anime games are either arena fighters, or they're pretty much like games like Dynasty Warriors, where you fight hordes and hordes of enemies and stuff like that, with little changes added here and there to them, but they're pretty much the same game all the way through, but with a different anime license. And I think that there's so much you can do with anime games. There's so much developers can do to make them much more appealing to even people, to gamers who aren't into that anime, who aren't into animes at all. And there's so much I think they can do to appeal to everyone, or appeal to bring more people in to play these games. But instead, it's the same cycle every year with these titles. But with Dragon Ball Kakarot, I was hoping that it will be a little bit more. I mean, you know, like, I would love to play an RPG of a Dragon Ball game, but to me, like I said in the previous video, this game looks no different than what I seen even in Xenoverse. It just, like, to me, in my opinion, is Xenoverse, you know, added with more exploration and added with some RPG elements and stuff that you can do that's outside of combat, you know, like driving a car or going to Chi-Chi's place to get, you know, meals to power up your character and stuff like that. But to overall, it still seems like, and it looks like, the same game that I've played in the past with past Dragon Ball games. Now, there was newer footage that was released recently at a convention where they showed off more of the game. They finally officially revealed the entire world map and places that you can explore in the game. Now, I think that the issue is with Dragon Ball Kakarot, and which the issue is with the Dragon Ball license in general, is, if you guys don't know, is that Bandai Namco, their agreement in order to retain the license for the Dragon Ball series is the fact is that they have to push out a Dragon Ball game each and every year. So since they have to push out a game each and every year in order to retain the license, then you know what these developers are going to do. They're going to cut corners, or they're not going to put as much effort into these games, because they have to have the game out within a certain amount of time, or else they won't be able to hold on to the license. So to me, in my opinion, okay, I can see why they would hit a wall when it comes to development time. But at the same time, why can't they develop more than one Dragon Ball game. You have one game where they spend more time, you know, ironing out and coming up with different ideas to make the Dragon Ball game and a better experience, and at the same time bring in or they can experiment and try something much more creative and original, something much more different, and risky, while they have another series that's out there that they can put out while they work on this one Dragon Ball game and make it the best Dragon Ball game ever. I also like, for example, look at the superhero genre when it comes to superhero games. Look at the Batman Arkham series. This is the first time we ever seen a superhero genre or a superhero game that took itself much more seriously than it was in the past. Because if you look at the past superhero games, most of them were cash grabs. They were games that they hurry up and put out before the movie's released, or they just put it out because that game or because that series had a cartoon or they have toys and figures and stuff, so they want to hurry up and put a game to complement it, and those games end up not being well. But if you look at what Rocksteady had done with the Batman franchise, with the Arkham series, they actually took a superhero game and made it much more appealing, and now the superhero genre has been taken much more seriously. Look at Insomniac Games, what they've done with Spider-Man. Now we have an official Spider-Man game that's really, really good. So now that Arkham Asylum had pretty much paved the way for it, now it became a new standard to push out high quality comic book games, so I figured that we need that game, that anime game, that's going to pretty much be that new standard for how developers should approach anime games. Is because I thought One Piece World Seeker was going to be that game. I really believe that. And the thing is, I'm not even a One Piece fan. Matter of fact, I can't stand One Piece. But what they done with One Piece and what they presented with World Seeker, having this open world, and it seemed like that this game was going to be something, a One Piece game that's going to be taken much more serious, or an anime game that's going to be taken much more seriously in terms of development and everything, and innovation for anime games. I was really intrigued by it. Never really cared about One Piece, but what they've shown off from what we've seen in trailers and stuff, it really made it believable to me that this game was going to be a very, very good game, that this could be something that could help anime games in terms of quality is concerned. And once the game came out, it was no different than any other anime game, and environments with not much to do to it, and the combat wasn't really that great and everything, and they really dropped the ball with it. So I was kind of disappointed. So when I seen the announcement of Dragon Ball Kakarot, I thought that, hey, this is it. This is something that we could finally get our hands on and everything, and to build and to pretty much step up the standards to anime games. And the fact is that it depends on who the developer is, and I believe that CyberConnect, when they work on these anime games, when you look at the Naruto games, the Ninja Storm games, don't get me wrong, I think they do a good job as far as presentation is concerned. They do good with visuals, they do good at capturing those key moments in animes and stuff like that. But in terms of gameplay, those games, to me, in my opinion, because I did have the very first Ninja Storm games, even though the game looked gorgeous and everything and looks beautiful, and if you're a fan of that game or that anime, you're going to go crazy, because it feels like you're actually playing that anime because of how the game is visually appealing. But in terms of gameplay, the gameplay is very button mashy. And then they added the multiplayer component where you're able to play competitively, and there was no layer of depth to it at all. It was just a button masher that you shouldn't take serious at all. But to me, they weren't fun games to me at the end of the day. And then they done there, to me, like I said, hats off to CyberConnect to building such beautiful games, anime games, especially the Naruto series. And now they moved over to Dragon Ball Kakarot, and to me, I'm not impressed every time I see CyberConnect, because if you don't know, CyberConnect also worked on the Dot Hack series. Even though I like Dot Hack as an anime, the games were okay. They weren't that fun. They were kind of repetitive and everything. And if you look at CyberConnect's, like, I guess you say, portfolio, in their history with their games, they make okay games. They don't really they don't really go above and beyond or try to innovate, or I guess you could say try something much more risky, or try something that's much more appealing and have layers of depth behind their gameplay. And they were also working on Final Fantasy VII Remake at one point, and Square Enix, from what was said, that they didn't like how the game turned out, so they pretty much fired them. So that says a lot about CyberConnect, and now they're on Dragon Ball Kakarot now, and looking at the new gameplay where you're Majin Vegeta and you're traveling around, and the overworld, to me the overworld looks very bland. It looks very uninspired, and it looks very like there's not much you can do. It looks lifeless, and that's my concern with this game. And then on top of that, as I said before, the combat doesn't look appealing at all. It looks very, very repetitive. Now my issue is not only with the game, is what people, how people damage control, or how people pretty much make excuses for CyberConnect. There's some excuses where people saying, well, CyberConnect never made an RPG before, and is the first of its kind, so we should give them some slack. And that's not true. They worked on .hack. They were the masterminds behind the .hack series, so they worked on RPGs before. Like I said before, they also worked on the Ninja Storm games and stuff like that, and they also was at one point working on Final Fantasy VII remakes gameplay and stuff like that, and then they've been dropped. So they do have some knowledge of this stuff or whatever. They just don't do it too well. And I see a lot of people make excuses. One person told me that you stop complaining or whatever like that, and it's not complaining, it's criticizing the game. And because you've seen their past, I'm going off of past history and what I've experienced with this company and what they've done with their games and stuff like that, and you can see it pouring through, and even the Kakarot game that's going on. And one person told me to be happy that they're even making a Dragon Ball game. Enjoy, just be happy. We're lucky to have a game. So you're telling me that we shouldn't criticize a game, because if we do, there's a chance that they may not work on another Dragon Ball game. Because somebody literally assumed that I was a Naruto fan and said that I'm only criticizing and bashing the game because I'm a Naruto fan. So I could tell what kind of community I'm embracing right now. This is all new to me. And I was like, wait a minute, like all I own is the first Ninja Storm back on PS3, and I own the other Naruto game that came out. The multiplayer game was the Shinobi Strikers, and I dropped that the moment I played it and found out I really didn't like the game much at all. So to assume that I must be a Naruto fan is the reason why I'm criticizing the game is ridiculous. I own more Dragon Ball games than I've ever compared to Naruto, and like I said, from me playing some of these Dragon Ball games, I always have my criticism of it and stuff like that, and hopefully they improve on them. But this is like a whole nother league when it comes to Dragon Ball Kakarot, is because they're toting this game as an RPG, which I love RPGs. But to me, in my opinion, when it comes to RPGs, if you're going to do this whole RPG thing, do it all the way. To me, in my opinion, as far as those elements are concerned. And then there's another comment that someone has said to me, is that they said that, well, you're not a developer. If you can't make a game, and put as much effort as they did, as they're doing with this game, then you shouldn't say anything about it if you can't develop games. Now, to me, I think that's the most flawed, stupidest logic I've ever heard from anybody. So you're telling me that in order for me to give an opinion about a game or criticize a game, I have to be able to develop a game just as good as these developers, or put that amount of effort into developing the game in order for me to have room to criticize a game. That makes no sense to me. So I have to be a developer, I have to make a game in order to criticize it. That sounds so stupid. I'm a consumer. When I see a product and I'm not really feeling the product, or the company is not doing anything to ensure confidence in me about a product, I have a right to criticize it. That makes no sense that I have to be a developer or have some knowledge on game development in order for me to give my opinion on a game. That is self-deflection to the max. That makes no sense at all. And that's what gives these developers the excuse to pretty much cash out mediocre products or to sell subpar products, you know, and people will eat it up and they'll continue. It pretty much tells them that, hey, we don't have to put out as much effort because people's going to make excuses for us and people's going to buy this game regardless of what we put out, so they don't have to put efforts. And to me, why wouldn't you want to criticize something? When you're a fan of something, I think you should be able to criticize a game, because if you criticize and let the developers know that, hey, you shouldn't do this, you should do that, or hey, how about you go about this with this approach with this game, you'll eventually somewhat get a better product. You want a better product, because if you hold these developers accountable for what they do with these games, then overall it makes everybody happy. It's good for the industry. It's good for the developers. It's good for everyone. It's good for the consumer and everything. I don't understand why would you just want to. And like I said, it's, if you enjoy Kakarot, I'm not saying that you can't enjoy what they have. If this is enough for you, that's fine. But the fact is that you have to insult me, or you insult other people who are on my side who think that this game is going to be trash or whatever like that, to insult them or whatever is like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Like, we supposed to value your opinion, but you can't value our opinion. And another argument, which sounds stupid to me, is too, well, it's just a demo, or you haven't played the game, why are you being so hard on it, or why are you criticizing you haven't played it? But yet you haven't played the game, but you're giving the game all kinds of praise and saying that this is going to be a good game and everything, but you haven't played the game. So by that logic, why are you praising the game if you haven't played it? But yet I can't criticize the game and haven't played it. That doesn't make sense. You can praise it, but you have the authority to tell me that I can't criticize it because I haven't played it. That makes no sense to me. Like, I haven't played the game, but I can't criticize it. You haven't played the game, but you're saying that the game is going to be a good game, and you're praising the game and haven't not once played the game at all. That makes no sense to me. And that's what cracks me up. And not just because, not in the anime game community or the Dragon Ball game community, just gamers in general. You make this excuse saying that you haven't played the game, why you're judging it, why you're criticizing it, but then your answer in return to rebuttal mine is to say that this game looks good and it's going to be a good game, but you haven't played it. That makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. So, in terms of that, as far as I'm concerned, I think when it comes to these anime games, what they need to do is, and what the developer said with Dragon Ball Kakarot, is that when it comes to these locations, when you look at the map and you look at these locations, a lot of these maps are connected together. And I've seen some people in the conversation saying, why aren't there any, like, why connect the desert to a forest? You know, you leave in the canyon, then the next place is like a forest land. It doesn't make sense, you know, in that sense. Why can't we travel there, you know, through other, you know, specific locations to get to these other areas, like make the world one big world? Now, what the developer said is, and what makes it hard for Dragon Ball, for the Dragon Ball games, to me, when you want to make an open world Dragon Ball game, when it comes to anime games and games in general, I think the hardest thing is they try to stay faithful to the source material in some ways. As far as locations concerned, characters are concerned, story and plot development is concerned, and everything. And when it comes to the Dragon Ball Kakarot, when it comes to locations, Dragon Ball has limited locations. When you look at the anime, the characters fight in specific locations, and the developers was pretty much saying that the reason why, if you look at the overworld, they give you an illusion that is a big open world, but it's not. They're going off by what's been presented in the anime. Any location that they create that's not part of that location, it's all made up. It's all made up, and they don't want to go that route by making up locations and stuff like that just to have this bit, just to create an open world. So they're limited to by what they can develop based on what the anime has in the anime, which I think that's a mistake when it comes to these anime games. To me, in my opinion, is I think they should take risks to make much more original elements, much more original gameplay that's not found in anime. And what I mean by that is, since they are limited by the scope of what the anime has, there's only but so much they can do. When it comes to the Dragon Ball license, when you think about it, especially when you're making an RPG, think about it for a second. when you're making an RPG or whatever, you have, you know, character stats. You want to focus on character development and everything like that. So when you're trying to convert that into an anime, especially as in Dragon Ball, you have to stick to the script. You have to stick to what the anime has. The anime is the dictator of the story. So there's only but so much you can do to the story. And then when you look at the Dragon Ball universe itself, these are very overpowered characters. Goku is overpowered. Even Krillin himself is overpowered compared to most characters that you find in most animes. So how would you be able to make an RPG or make a game that's believable when you have characters who are pretty much planet busters or even universe busters, and try to scale them down into an RPG to where you have to fight enemies who are in reality should be much weaker than these characters? How is like comparing it to a Superman game. How would you be able to make the challenging thing is to make a believable Superman game? Like, because Superman to himself is pretty much like a god. He's overpowered. So how would you be able to make a game to where a guy who can pretty much take anything, bullets and everything, how would you be able to make him fight characters or fight mobs of enemies who aren't even on the same level as him and able to beat Superman? For example, like, oh, well, you can give them kryptonite bullets. So that means you have to make a storyline based on how these enemies have pretty much their hands on kryptonite type of technology and stuff to be able to weaken Superman. So the challenge is to try to build a story that makes it much believable. And this is the sense to me when it comes to Dragon Ball games, and specifically trying to make it into an RPG. How would you be able to make it believable for Goku and them to be able to fight mobs of enemies, you know, that's outside of Frieza or other characters they have faced along the way, to be able to give Goku and them a challenge and just to make it believable? So to me, in my opinion, I think when it comes to anime games, that what developers should do, in my opinion, is to don't constrain themselves to the anime itself. I think, to me, they should build their own story that's only dedicated to the video game universe. Like, for instance, we all know that the Dragon Ball movies, majority of the Dragon Ball movies in the past, is not canon at all. They're not even related to the anime. And if you try to squeeze some of the movies into the Dragon Ball Z timeline, some of them don't even make sense, and they contradict most of the elements of this Dragon Ball Z timeline. So that's why you really can't place the movies into the Dragon Ball timeline. So in my opinion, I think to make these games, especially if you want to make them into RPGs and make them much more appealing, especially if you're using the Dragon Ball license, to me, I think what developers should do is use the movies. For example, they could build a Dragon Ball video game universe based off of one movie. You can base it off, you can use the Garlic Jr., for example. You can use the Garlic Jr. movie as a perfect baseline, and then you can build your own storylines based off of the Garlic Jr. Universe. Because think about it, if you look at the Saiyan saga, when they first encounter Raditz, I believe that from my knowledge, if I can remember, it's been so long, that this is the only time Goku and Piccolo first joined together, you know, as rivals, to come together to fight a common enemy. That was the first time they have ever done that. But if you look at Garlic Jr. movie, this was I guess you can say, the first time they have ever came together to join forces to fight a common enemy, which was Garlic Jr. So you can pretty much build off of that. And that means if developers want to borrow some elements from the Dragon Ball Z timeline, from the different sagas, then they can do that, but tell them in a different way. So if you start from the Garlic Jr. storyline, which brought Goku and Piccolo together to fight a common enemy, which means if you want to introduce the Saiyan saga from there, Goku and Piccolo will already have that team up dynamic relationship with one another, and you can make their interactions and personality a little bit much more different, since they had teamed up with each other in the past. So that means the Raditz Saiyan saga will be much more different than the original timelines, because their interactions will be totally different from one another because their previous encounter with Garlic Jr. So I think that would be a much more interesting twist. That means you can play around with the characters and their relationships with one another, because of you're going off a completely different storyline. And then instead of killing Raditz, I'm just giving examples. Instead of killing Raditz, maybe you could find a way to make Raditz a good guy or whatever like that. I'm just giving out examples of what they can do. Take risk. Try something different. Now, as far as the RPG elements is concerned, with Dragon Ball Kakarot, they could have done a lot of things to this. If you notice, what I highly hated with Dragon Ball Kakarot and what they've done was with the Raditz, with the Saiyan Saga, especially with the Raditz scene, is the fact is that why in the world that Raditz is pretty much doing all these higher powered attacks and everything like that, where the characters weren't as powerful as as they were in the future and stuff like that. So the combat should have been much more grounded, because if you think about the combat when he fought Raditz, it was more grounded than ever. And Piccolo and Goku wasn't as powerful. So, but in the game, you're already feeling really powerful, at the very beginning. I think there should be a progression as far as power is concerned. And if you're going to go the RPG route, I believe that the developer should have had weighted clothing as a part that affects your character stats, because at the very beginning of Dragon Ball Z, weighted clothing did play somewhat of impact on how the characters, as far as their strength was concerned. If you take the weighted clothing off, it increased the character's power level and stuff like that. They could have went into that when it comes to the equipment. Weighted clothing, putting this much clothing on the character can affect their power level or anything in that sense. And since also that they're introducing other characters you can play. You can play as Goku, you can play as Gohan, Great Saiyaman, you can play as Piccolo. You're playing as these different characters, and I believe that if you are going to play as these different characters in this game, that you should be able to pretty much give each character their own specific gameplay tailored towards them. Like I said in the comment section in one video, I was saying that with Piccolo, his gameplay should have some type of meditation type of mechanic, where he has to meditate in order to increase his power level or to increase his stats in some way, where you can go to different meditation locations, and once he meditates, he goes into like a mental dimension where he goes into his mind and he fight past enemies or stronger enemies or made up enemies that's not even found in the Dragon Ball universe, but it's made up specifically for the game in order for you to increase Piccolo's power, where once he beats that challenge or anything within his meditated state, he learns new combos, he learns new abilities. I think that'd be much more interesting. You guys remember in the anime where once Goku had died and they had to prepare for when Vegeta and Nappa show up, when the Saiyans show up, Piccolo had took Gohan and threw him into the wild, and Gohan had to survive in the wild for, I believe it was over a year before, and then Piccolo comes back and he trains him how to fight. So I thought that would be a pretty interesting gameplay mechanic where you take control of young Gohan, and to remind you, they would have to completely change the gameplay mechanics of how this all work in general. Overall, they had to overhaul the entire gameplay mechanics, but I thought it would be pretty cool. They throw Gohan into the wild equipped with a sword, and you actually control Gohan, and you actually got to survive in the woods, and Piccolo will give you pretty much an objective of what you need to learn or what type of items or things you need to have by the end of all this. So by the time Piccolo comes and visit Gohan to see how he progress, he would have these particular objectives completed. So you'll be Gohan. He didn't really know how to fly at that point, so he's able to travel through the forest. You fight different mobs of dinosaurs and enemies and stuff like that. You hunt, you collect food and stuff like that. You can make food and stuff in order to survive in the woods and stuff like that. I think that'd be a pretty interesting gameplay mechanic. And also when the Saiyans had arrived, give Gohan his gameplay mechanic can also be a confidence meter, because Gohan was never really confident in himself and his ability, and he also put a lot of his friends in danger and stuff. So you can give him this confidence meter depending on certain things and certain conditions that you meet during combat or whatever missions that you do, where depending on how high his confidence is also affect how much damage he takes, how often his attacks connect. And also too, we also know that Gohan has hidden potential. So every time Gohan is near death, his hidden potential would randomly appear or come up, and it increases attack, his movement speed, and everything. There's so much you can do as far as like RPG elements with a Dragon Ball game that they can flesh out. But this is just some of my ideas and thoughts that they could implement in a Dragon Ball RPG. And like I said before, with anime games in general and not just Dragon Ball, they should just build their own video game universe. Stray away from the plots of the animes. Don't constrain yourself to the plots, because like I said, not only that, it alienates people who've never been fans of the anime, who never watched the anime. Most people won't pick up the game is for the fact is that, hey, they're not a fan of the game, they never heard of it, so they don't want to dive into a game that they don't have any knowledge of the characters, the lore, or anything. So you can pretty much create a base point and then build on that with original ideas. Play around with the characters, change the dynamics and relationships between some of the characters within the Dragon Ball universe, and you can be able to shape it much differently and everything, you know. So that's pretty much my overall thought. I'm still not impressed with Dragon Ball Kakarot, and it's only a couple months away now, and it have yet to convince me. And it just boggles my mind is how people can have their opinion on why they like it, but then shoot down anybody who doesn't like it, and then use the excuse that, well, you haven't played the game, why are you trashing the game? But yet you haven't played the game and you're praising the game. That doesn't make sense. But I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. I know this has been a long video, talk for 30 minutes. I definitely want to hear your thoughts of how they can approach a proper Dragon Ball role-playing game, and not just a Dragon Ball game. How could they approach anime games in general to make it appealing to people who've never been fans of it, and make them want to actually play it with no knowledge of the franchise itself? And, you know, do you think they should go a different route in terms of story? Should they just make their own video game canon with the characters and just play around with the characters and take much more risk? Definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, like the video, share it, pass it around. And also, if you want to hear anything as far as news concerning anime games or Dragon Ball Kakarot in general, make sure you hit the bell to be notified. This is MugenLord signing off. See you game fiends later. Peace out. It looks like you reached the end of the video. Well, while you're at it, check out some of my other discussion videos by clicking on the annotations below, and don't forget to follow me on other social media platforms to stay up to date with future content. Signing off.